Now, police in Essex say the migrants found locked inside a shipping container in Tilbury docks are from Afghanistan. One man died and many of the remaining 34 needed hospital treatment after they were discovered yesterday morning. Let's go live to Tilbury now because our correspondent Andy Moore is there. Andy, just bring us up to date on the latest as we know it about the people who I think are being kept in the building behind you, correct?
That's right, they're being interviewed in this cruise terminal in the building behind me at Tilbury docks. There are about 30 of the migrants there, we believe. All 34 who survived were taken to hospital yesterday, various hospitals, suffering from hypothermia and dehydration. 30 of them were fit enough to be released and they're now being questioned. 4 others are still being treated at Southend Hospital, but police believe they will be well enough to be released later on and then will then join their colleagues here. Police are emphasising that these people are being treated as victims of human trafficking, and the primary concern at this stage is for their health and welfare. Now, as you said, we understand they're from Afghanistan, from the Sikh community, and in fact we've seen a lot of local Sikhs coming and going here all day today with food, with bags, presumably of clothing, even some soft toys for the children. We believe there are at least 7 children in the group here. So police are trying to find out more about what happened here yesterday when the group of 35 were discovered inside this locked container. They were heard screaming and banging. Unfortunately, one man died and a post-mortem examination is being carried out today on him.
And we know that that container started its journey in Zeebrugge. Have the police said anything more about how they think those people ended up in that container, or at what point they ended up in that container?
Yes, this is an international investigation. What we know is that the container arrived at the port of Zeebrugge on Friday evening, about 7 o'clock in the evening. So the 35 would have been on board it at that stage. We don't know how far in advance they were put on board. They would then have spent the night on the container, on the ship, which was travelling from Zeebrugge here to Tilbury. And it was when it arrived here some 12 hours later, earlier in the morning, when the people were discovered on board. Just to add that there were fears that there might be people on board the other 50 containers on that ship, but police searched all those and there was no sign of people. Also, there was a possibility, police said, that there may have been people on board another container taken to another port, but police have now discounted that, so they know it's just these 35 people, 34 now, unfortunately, they're dealing with.
OK, Andy Moore with the latest from Tilbury. Thanks, Andy. Well, with me in the studio is Harjap Singh Bhangal, who's an immigration lawyer. He's also from the Sikh community. Harjap, thanks very much for coming in to talk with us.
Thank you.
What do we know about these people coming from the Sikh community in Afghanistan? It's not something we hear about very often.
No, there's only about 3,000 Sikhs in Afghanistan now, about 800 families. At one time there were 100,000, but it's been dwindling due to problems they've faced, such as they kind of having trouble with cremations. They've had to have police escorts, verbal abuse, physical abuse, and as a result Sikhs are leaving Afghanistan and they feel persecuted, and they're leaving for other countries in Europe such as Germany, France and the UK.
So they feel persecuted in Afghanistan, so if they were to come over to this country, would they have a good claim for asylum seeker status?
Well, if they could prove it, then they would definitely could. And also there are historical ties as well between Britain and the Sikhs, that we know that 20% of the British Army in World War I was made up of Sikhs. Over 150,000 Sikhs died in both World Wars fighting for Britain. So a lot of organisations now are interested, especially Sikh organisations, as to how this pans out. So the Sikhs historically see Britain as a safe haven, and hence these Sikhs from Afghanistan have come here. Whether they've come here as genuine victims of being trafficked, or come to seek asylum, or for economic migrancy, or even elements of all three, that is to be determined by the UK Border Force, who are interviewing them. And that will probably happen today. Everyone will be interviewed separately to see if their stories are consistent and see the real reason why they're here.
Presumably if they've come as victims of human trafficking or escaping persecution, then they're viewed slightly differently by
That's right. They'll be given time and they'll be viewed sympathetically. They'll be given about a year by the government, and they'll be allowed to stay here. Whereas if they're seen as asylum seekers and not victims of human trafficking, they'll be kept in detention most likely while their claims are being determined. But we've got to remember there's children involved here as well. So there were children also in that container, and therefore to hold children in detention becomes very controversial. and therefore most likely I would like to think if the government declares that they're victims of human trafficking and that they've been abused and they didn't know where they're going to end up, or they were being brought here to be sold on or used into prostitution or even used as slaves or cheap labour, then the government can decide, well, hold on, we'll give them some sort of respite here, we won't treat them like the average asylum seeker.
So when you say it's controversial if children are being held in detention, we know, as Andy Moore, our correspondent, was saying, they're now being questioned, most of them being questioned at a cruise terminal at Tilbury docks, but what's likely to happen to them directly?
I mean, what happens in an immigration interview is you're sat separately, a translator comes in, an immigration officer asks you questions, they all try to determine their nationality and identity. I can pretty much guarantee that these migrants don't have any documents on them, they won't have passports, driving licence, no one will know their names, no one will know where they come from. Then the government approaches the embassy, so approach the Afghan embassy, are these people your nationals? And once that's confirmed, then dialogue can be sustained between both the embassies and the countries, and they'll be asked, well, why did you need to come here? Under what pretenses were you brought here? Are you genuine victims? I mean, these interviews are quite long, they're 2 to 3 hours long. So the government will try and get down to the bottom of this, and especially in relation to the person that died, they'll try and find out, well, was he killed by his fellow migrants? Was he dead when he entered the container? Did he die as a result of being in the container? I mean, exactly how did that death come about? A very unfortunate situation.
Okay, a lot of questions to be answered there. Harjap Singh Bhangal, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.